So the flute has quite an effect. I was in the supermarket the other day, and I heard some flute music. I wasn't paying much attention to it. And suddenly I started hearing violin music, and I got real tense. So I figured, I must have picked the right instrument. I don't know how much more time I got here. I got several stories here. The Addams Family. You remember that show? You remember the Addams Family? Anyway, I used to do a show called The Pruitts of Southampton at Starkville Distillery. But by the way, I took sailing one day. Somebody needed somebody to captain a boat, and I used to sail. Anyway, and so I saw Phyllis, and I took her and she and her daughter on sailing. And I told her, I said, oh yeah, I do your show. Well, anyway, the guy that wrote the show was a guy named Vic Mizzy. Ever heard of Vic Mizzy? Probably not. He's not a famous composer. He made a lot of money, but he's not famous. Vic is a songwriter from New York. And so we were doing this Pruitts of Southampton, and he came up to me and he says, you know, I got this great idea. He says, for a TV show theme. You know, the big deal in TV shows was writing the theme. The composers got residuals for the theme, but they didn't get residuals for writing the score each week, so they got it for the theme. So they wanted to get money for that. So obviously they wanted to come up with really something that was super for a theme. So he said, what do you think of this? And he went, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And I looked at him, I said, I don't know, Vizzy, do you think it'll go? Funny things that happen, you know, it just goes on and on and on. And let me look at some notes here, see what else. There's one time I was doing in Disney, and was doing my electronic bit, and what you had to do is you had to take the cork out of the end of the flute and put in another cork that had a hole down the stem, and you'd hook the mic up to it. So that's how you could amplify the sound. Well, stupid me, instead of pushing the cork out with a rod, I tried to do it with my thumb. Well, guess what happened? I put a huge gash in my thumb. Blood was spreading all over the place. The oboe player next to me, Gordon Schoenberg, was scrambling to get me a Band-Aid, and the conductor says, aren't you ready yet? I said, I got a little problem here, just hang on. I mean, you just never knew exactly what was going to happen. So we're getting close to the end here, and I'd be delighted if somebody had a question, something that I have. Yep.
I think Schoenberg lived in Hollywood, but I'm not sure when. Did you ever cross paths?
Yeah, no, I didn't. That was a little bit before I really got into the business. But yeah, he lived up in the Hollywood Hills off of Coldwater Canyon, somewhere up there. And there was a church, and everybody lived in Hollywood, you know.
Was he ever tempted to write for the studios, or did anybody ever think of him buying it?
I don't think Schoenberg wrote anything for the studios. I don't think so, no. It's amazing what we had. We had Stravinsky on one hill, and Schoenberg on another hill, and Heifetz over in Brentwood, and it was incredible. I mean, they all just came there. So I was very blessed to come from such an environment. I mean, it was really quite unusual. You know. Any other questions? Yeah, Dean.
Yeah, how many years did your father work with our friend David Rose?
Oh, David Rose. Does anybody know who David Rose is? He wrote Holiday for Strings and the music for Little House on the Prairie. What other shows did he do?
Highway to Heaven.
Highway to Heaven.
Bonanza.
What?
Bonanza.
And Bonanza. That was his big one. And he was very successful. He's probably one of the richest guys in Hollywood, the film composers, because he just worked all the time. You get these shows that would go on forever and ever and ever. My dad knew him. My dad was a classical clarinetist. His Dave, he came from a jazz background, so he liked to hang around classical guys. And so my dad worked for him for a number of years, and I remember being home one day, and I kept hearing the Rhapsody in Blue over and over and over again. You know that clarinet solo in the beginning? And I kept hearing that, and then It was because David, from Dave's point of view, that was a classical piece. Even though it was Rhapsody in Blue. And so that he played it for Dave. I think it was at the Hollywood Bowl where he did it. So he knew Dave real well. Any other questions? Yeah, Jim.
Since you say you like playing all kinds of music, do you mind telling us about your stint on tenor sax with the Disneyland Band?
Oh yeah. Well, I got out of the Army, and you're in the Army. I was away for 2.5 years, and I'd been pretty successful before I left. And I got home. Of course, nobody wanted to see me, and go away, don't bother us. And so I had to sort of scramble to get back into the business, and so I take anything, John. And so I knew some people down at Disneyland. This guy heard me play the Vivaldi Piccolo Concerto with the Santa Monica Symphony. He said, "Well, I need somebody in the band. Can you play a saxophone?" I said, "Well, not too well, but I can play it." It's like the recorder, So I went down there and I played tenor sax and a little clarinet with the polka band, and that was the first job I had getting out of the Army. And money was money. I paid the bills, so that's what I did. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
How did you become involved at UCLA, and what motivated you to write the books?
Oh, the book, yeah. That was a labor of love, I'll tell you. That was something that was rattling around in my head, all these ideas that I had, and I had to get them on paper. And so I met this guy who was an editor at the TRW Corporation, took a few lessons from me, a wonderful writer. And so we had access to a lot of scientists and other people, so I asked him if he'd be interested, and he was. So we got together and did that, and tried to explain how everything works, what creates the sound, how the lungs work, how the muscles work. We took stuff from Gray's Anatomy, how the facial muscles work. I was amazed to see how they really converge right down at the corners of your mouth. I didn't know exactly how that all works. So that's how the book came about. And I was very relieved when I was able to put all this stuff down on paper, and I got a lot of information that I didn't know in the process. So that's sort of a brief summary of it. Anything else? Yeah.
Talk about the movie View to a Kill, it's called.
What's that?
There's a movie about a flute player that witnesses a murder or something.
Oh yeah. It was David Soul. Yeah.
I remember hearing you play all the Anderson, all the guys.
The guy they thought he murdered somebody in an apartment building. Yeah, it was called Through Naked Eyes, I think they call it. It was originally supposed to be called The Voyeur, but they didn't think that was a good title, so they changed it Through Naked. What?
I always remember the flute playing.
Yeah, well, so I recorded that. I wrote some condenses and stuff. I did the Haydn Blues Concerto and a little bit of the Mozart Flute Concerto, the solo of the D major. And so I coached David Soul. He came over to UCLA, and I got him on. He came on stage, and I showed him how to play the flute. Finally, I looked at him. He was a guitar player, and I said, "You look more like a flute player than I do." All the acts down, you really look good. I think Peter was asking about UCLA. I just started teaching there because I was sort of bored. I wanted to do something that I thought was, that I'd be of help and a little more creative. So anyway, and it's been a good job. I've been there 32 years, and I've really enjoyed it. It's probably the sort of the focus of my life, especially now. Yeah.
What I like about movie music is that I hear hints of certain composers.
Yeah.
I think the one I hear most is Rachmaninoff. Anybody, anything?
Oh, these composers, they steal from everybody, I mean, steal's the wrong word. I mean, they can get ideas from everybody. But, yeah, you hear Rachmaninoff. You hear everything. Sometimes they'll just take directly a piece because it fits. Well, I guess we're through because it looks like you've got to go on to your next event. So, anybody has any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but I think our time's about up. So, anyway.